Christy, Tarot Girl Next Door. Thank you so much for ordering a numerology birth profile reading. I'm really excited to go through your numbers with you and give you my interpretation of them. I think and I hope that the information will be useful to you. It's definitely interesting and I have a lot to share with you. But before we get started, I have a little bit of housekeeping that I want to take care of. The first thing is I want to make sure that you receive the 2 documents that I sent you. These would be the actual birth chart with all of your numbers and all of the calculations for each number. So it'll show you exactly how I came up with each of your numbers in your chart. This is something that may or may not be of interest to you, and that's fine either way. It's not a level of detail that's really necessary to understanding your chart, but it is good to have it as a reference in case, as you're listening to your reading, you have some questions about where I got anything from. That's where you would find that information. The other document I sent you is a list of key terms that you'll find in the birth chart. It gives you a definition for each of them, as well as just the types of information that we pull from each. So I think that's also useful and might be something that you want to have out in front of you while you listen to the reading so that you can follow along. So go ahead and pull those documents out if you haven't already. And as you do, I'm going to give you just a little bit of background on numerology and on the birth chart that, again, I just think will help as you listen to the reading, give you just a little bit more depth. The first thing I want to talk about is just the idea of reincarnation, the idea that our souls have been here before and will probably be here again, and that we've come into this lifetime with a very particular purpose, something that we've agreed to on a soul level prior to our incarnation, and that is kind of what we're here to accomplish or to achieve, that we have some very specific lessons that we need to learn in this lifetime. That idea is fundamental to numerology, and it comes up at several places in the birth chart, just so I want to give you a heads up about that. The other thing I want to just briefly mention is kind of where we get all the information for your chart from, and that's from 2 sources. The first is your full name at birth, so your first, your middle, and your last name as it appears on your birth chart. And the second source of information is your date of birth, so the month, the day, and the year that you were born. We get very different types of information from both of those sources. From the birth name, we get information about your internal energy, so your personal vibration. Who are you? What are your strengths? What are your talents? What are some things that maybe you struggle with on a personal level? What's your personality like? What motivates you? This is the kind of stuff that we can find in the birth name. The birth date, on the other hand, tells us about the energy that is external to you in this lifetime. It tells us about the path you're on, what types of experiences you're likely to have in this lifetime, what opportunities are you going to come across, and what types of challenges or roadblocks are likely going to come your way in this lifetime. It also is where we find information about the life purpose, and I think one of the cool things about numerology is it's one of the only places where we can really get that articulated in a very clear way, like, why are we here? I can't tell you how many people come in for my readings, my tarot readings or whatnot, feeling very lost and wanting to know what their life purpose is, and this is exactly where we would find that in a very clear and direct way. So again, the birth name is internal energy, the birth date is external energy. And so because there's just so much that we can get from a numerology birth chart, it can be a little bit overwhelming. I've divided the reading up into 3 sections. The first section will focus on the birth name and the types of information that we get from that. The second will focus on the birth date and the core numbers that we get from that. And then the third video will focus on kind of just all of the various elements and how they work together. Of course, I will be talking about that throughout the entire reading, but that's what the third video will really focus on, as well as maybe then kind of just bringing up a couple of more minor elements in the chart that you may be interested in. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started on your chart, and we will begin, like I said, with your birth name and the key numbers that we can pull from there. Okay, so the first number that we're going to look at is called the expression number, and we get that by converting each of the letters of your full birth name, so first, middle, and last, to their numerical equivalents. And that's really based on their position in the alphabet. And if you want to know exactly how I did that, go ahead and take a look at the calculation sheet that I was talking about earlier. That'll give you all the details. But like I said, this number comes from all the letters in your full birth name. And what it tells us is about what your overall kind of personal vibration is, who you are in sum in total. It gives us a lot of detail about what your abilities are, what your talents are, and what your kind of weaknesses are as an individual, as a person. Your expression number is an 8, and that makes you a very lucky woman because 8 is the number of abundance in numerology. And that means that you have many talents and many gifts that you were born with, many natural abilities. Anything that you set your mind to, you're really able to accomplish, to learn, and to succeed in. 8 is also the number of manifestation. So you would have incredible manifestation powers and abilities. Again, if you set a goal and you follow through with it, you are very likely to accomplish it. 8 is also the number of personal power. And so you are likely a person who has more energy than the average person, is stronger mentally and also physically than the average person, and is able to get a lot done. 8s are very productive people. They're doers. They're always on the go. They're always busy, and they're always accomplishing something. They are definitely not the types of people who are going to be, sitting back and wasting time. That's very counter to who you are as a person. 8s kind of make the rest of us look bad because they're just always working and they're always getting things done. They're very driven types of people. Very competent types of people, as I said, and sometimes it can be a little bit of a challenge for people with an 8 expression to understand that they actually are born with more ability than the average person, and things are actually a little bit easier for you than they are for the average person, which is great for you, but it's just important that you're aware of that and that you're tolerant and have patience with people who are weaker than you, which is actually the vast majority of the population. So you have a wonderful expression number. It means that you're really capable of almost anything. Anything you set your mind to, you can accomplish. It makes you a little bit more career driven normally, although in your case, there are some other numbers in your profile that we'll talk about later that kind of temper that a little bit for you. But still, my guess would be that your job would be very important to you, that you do it very well, that you're known for, being very good at what you do. 8s tend to be leaders in their field. Again, you're a little different. There are some other numbers in your chart that tell me that you maybe aren't somebody who really likes to be front and center stage, but you definitely have leadership capabilities. So that's an important element of your chart as well. 8s also tend to be a little bit material driven. Money can be important to them, and the accumulation of material goods and material wealth is important to them usually. In your case, again, I don't think that's a driving force for you, but what it does mean in general is that 8s are usually able to attract money to them pretty easily. Money's usually not a problem. So even if you aren't wealthy, my sense would be that, you're never really going to struggle with having enough money. You should always have enough to live a fairly comfortable lifestyle. So that's another benefit to the 8 expression. Although 8s are pretty much focused on the material world, there is a very strong spiritual side to 8s as well. And it's important that you take time out for that. One of the best ways for 8s to kind of recharge and reconnect is by being in nature and getting outside. So that's an important thing to make sure that you make time for. Other aspects of the 8 in terms of challenges for them, like I mentioned, you tend to be capable of a lot more than the average person. And like I said, making sure that you're kind of compassionate about weakness in others. But another challenge that can present is that sometimes other people actually have difficulty connecting with you. They don't find you very relatable. And sometimes maybe even are a little bit intimidated by you. And so that can make it a little bit difficult to make strong interpersonal connections. And for you in particular, that's going to be tough because there are other aspects of your chart that make it so that having relationships and connecting with other people is very, very important to you. It's actually the most important thing to you, because we'll get into that later. That's the next number in your chart. But because of that, this difficulty that you might have as an 8 expression will kind of be extra tough for you. So that's something to look out for. Other aspects of the 8 expression are that sometimes you can be a little bit controlling. because you do things and you do them so well, sometimes it can be a little bit hard to relinquish control to other people and allow other people to step in and do things, or to delegate responsibility. That can be hard for you. It's very important that you do that and you allow other people to kind of step in and shine sometimes. Um, so that's another thing to just to look out for. And also sometimes eights can be a little bit stubborn and a little bit rigid. So look out for that too. But the bottom line for you is really that you have just an incredible amount of personal power. And it's important that you own that, and that you use it to your benefit and to the benefit of all the people around you, which I think in your case is not as much of a challenge, because your other numbers in your chart make you very people oriented and not, again, like I said, falling into some of the issues that some other eights have with kind of just being very materially driven and very concerned with money. I don't think that's a problem for you, but so I think just making sure that you own your power, that you're not afraid of your power, that you're not afraid to kind of step up and take charge when you need to, that these are some of the key things that you need to think about when it comes to your expression number. The next number that we're going to look at in your chart is called the soul urge number. And again, this is one of the numbers that we get from the birth name, and this comes specifically from the vowels in your name. And the soul urge number in numerology is a very intimate number. I actually think it's one of, if not the most revealing number in a person's chart, because it speaks to who you are at like the deepest level. This is not a side of yourself that you would reveal to everyone. Really, just the people who are closest to you would probably recognize this aspect of yourself. Sometimes even younger people have a hard time connecting with this energy. They don't really see how it's relevant to them, because sometimes this energy is kind of the parts of ourselves that we really kind of repress and don't bring out into the open very often. But once we reach the age of maturity, which you have, we start to kind of embrace this part of ourselves a little bit more. So my sense would be that you are actually aware of some of this energy. But again, this is a part of ourselves that we only reveal to people who are very close to. And your soul urge number is a number 2. Number 2s tend to be very relationship oriented, very concerned with other people, very sensitive to other people, and are really driven in everything they do by their relationships with other people, strengthening their relationships with other people. If it's good for your relationship, it's good for you. If it's not, then it's not good for you. That's kind of the way that you would evaluate almost everything. And so going back to that 8 expression number, where I said there are other numbers in your chart that temper it, this is one of the key places where we see that. The soul urge tells us a good deal about what drives everything you do, what drives your behavior, what motivates you. And so in your case, it means that your number 1 priority is your relationships with other people. Does this mean that you're an incredibly social, outgoing person? No, not at all. And in your chart, there's a lot of indicators that you're actually a more introverted person. But my sense would be that you have, a few people who you are very close to, and then probably most other people would fall into the acquaintance category. But the people who you are close to, you would do anything for. One of the pitfalls to soul urge is that because you're so driven to have harmony with these important people in your life, that sometimes you will avoid conflict when really you need to kind of work things out with other people. You're likely to kind of like push things under the rug. So that's something that you have to be careful about, because you really value harmony above anything else, but you can't kind of like skip through the tough parts in your relationships. Another thing that can sometimes happen with the 2 soul urge, especially earlier in life, is just being a little bit codependent, and especially in terms of romantic relationships, putting them kind of on a pedestal and putting that way above anything else, making, finding a life partner your only priority in life. You've kind of come past this point, I would assume, in your life. And so you're probably a little bit more balanced, but still the romantic relationship is still something that plays a big role for you in your life. But bottom line, relationships are everything to you. That's what drives you. Your interactions with other people. So going back to that 8 expression, where other 8s are really materially driven, while that is still, somewhat important to you, I would say that you really are not driven by that you're really driven by relationships and connections with other people. And that's the most important thing to you in this world. The next number that we're going to look at, also again, taken from your full name at birth, is your personality number. And this actually comes from the consonants in your full name, whereas the soul urge came from the vowels. And the personality number is just that. It's your personality. It's the face that you present to the outside world. This is the you that most people know. Not necessarily, people who you're really close with, they'll more recognize the characteristics that we saw in the soul urge. But this is like your day-to-day relationships, work colleagues, acquaintances, also how you present yourself, upon first meeting someone. And it also gives us a sense of how other people perceive you as well. And your personality number is a number 6. And the number 6 is a very warm and friendly and open type of energy. So it makes you appear much more extroverted than I think that you probably really are. But just like that 2 number in your soul urge, it makes you very people oriented, very relationship oriented. Again, balancing that 8 number in your expression very well. So you're friendly, you're warm, people tend to like you, see you as being a nice person, a kind person, somebody who is considerate of other people. Also, one of the nice things about the 6 personality, the number 6 is actually ruled by the goddess Venus. So a lot of times people with a 6 personality tend to be very attractive. So another reason why you seem to have some good numbers in your chart that give you some nice extra gifts here. But also that 6s tend to be very appearance oriented in general. You probably like to dress nicely or into fashion and that sort of thing, care about how things look. 6 is also connected very much to the family and to home life. So you would present yourself as being very family oriented, very wholesome usually, and also spend a good deal of time in your house, maybe entertaining. Also, like designing your house is important to you, cooking and all those sorts of things. That would be stuff that you like to do, but that also is part of kind of like how you present yourself to other people. One of the downfalls to this personality number is that because you can come across as like really kind and compassionate and caring, generous, is that sometimes you can attract people who are a little bit needy into your circle. And so you have to be careful with that and set boundaries and make sure that, there aren't these people who latch on to you because you are so kind of warm. One of the things I like to look at with a personality number is the name that we go by on a day-to-day basis. So in my case, my full birth name is Christine Marie Talbot, but very rarely do I come up and introduce myself and I'm like, hey, nice to meet you. My name is Christine Marie Talbot. No, I go by a nickname, my first name, Christy, and my last name, Christy Talbot. And that has a different energy to it and a different vibe to it. And because I'm using that number very purposefully, and that's kind of how I literally introduce myself to other people, I like to kind of take a look at that when I look at somebody's personality number to see how that expression for the day-by-day name might balance out the energy or not of the personality number. So I wanted to take a look at you in your case, and so I took your first name and then your married name actually, which is the combination that you go by day to day, and I just wanted to take a look at what energy that carried with it. And for you, that carries a 1 energy, which is great because that is a great balance to the 6. The 1 is someone who's it's much more of an individualistic type of number, an independent type of number, a very confident number, someone who's assertive, who will stand up for themselves if they need to, who's very together. And so I think that balances very well with the 6 energy where, you're nice and you're kind and you're friendly, but you're also not a pushover. And you take care of business and you take care of yourself and will stand up for yourself certainly if you need to. So that adds a nice balance to that 6 personality number. Okay, so that actually covers the main elements of your chart that we get from your birth name. But before we move on to the birth date, I just want to cover one more thing, and that is the primary intensifier, it's called, and the Karmic Lessons. And both of those items come from the frequency that certain letters and their corresponding numbers occur in your birth name. And again, take a look at that calculations chart if you want to understand exactly what I'm talking about and where I'm getting that from. But these numbers have to do with what I was talking about earlier with things that happen in your past lives that carry over into this life. And basically, in numerology, um, the single digit numbers, so numbers 1 through 9, each carry a very specific lesson with them. Um, and when we look at the letters in your name and the numbers that they correspond to and the frequency that they appear in your name, it's sort of like a report card for us. It gives us a sense of which of the lessons, 1 through 9, you have experience with, how much experience you have with them, and then which lessons you really haven't touched upon in previous lives and don't have very much experience with. And we look at that and then we kind of compare it to some of the core numbers in your chart, and it gives us a sense of kind of what energy you're coming into this lifetime with and what lessons you're working on and how well all of those numbers kind of do or don't work together. So in your case, you have one prime intensifier, and this is a number that appears with greater than average frequency in your name. And what it tells us is that this is a lesson that you have a lot of experience with from your past lives. And that energy then is almost like overemphasized in you and carry it with you into this lifetime. And that number is the number 1. And the lessons associated with the number 1 have to do with kind of independence and kind of doing things on your own. And sometimes when that number comes up overemphasized in your name as it does in yours, it means that you would be a little bit more introverted and removed from other people. So when I had talked earlier at various points saying, that my sense was that you're a little more introverted, even though you have this number 2 as your soul urge and this number 6 in your personality, which are both more extroverted types of energies, my sense is that overall you're a little bit more of an introverted type of person. That this is a big place where I'm kind of getting that from. It can also make you sometimes be a little bit self-centered, but I think that's balanced by that 2 and that 6 in your chart, so I think you're probably okay there. But it definitely makes you a little bit more introverted and a little bit more of an independent type of person. Tying into that 8 expression, it means, again, you probably prefer to kind of do things yourself, and it might be hard for you sometimes to kind of let other people in and delegate things to other people. So that's just something to look out for. Your karmic lessons, on the other hand, are any numbers 1 to 9 that appear with less than average frequency in your birth name. So they're in numerology, we say that means that these are lessons that you really haven't had much experience with in previous lifetimes, so you haven't really mastered their energy. And sometimes, depending on whether or not they appear in your chart in other places, that can present a little bit of a challenge. In your case, your karmic lessons numbers are numbers 2, number 6, and number 8. And coincidentally, those numbers do appear in big places in your chart, because those 3 numbers are the 3 numbers we've already gone through. So it's your expression number is an 8, your personality number is a 6, and your soul urge number is a 2. So what that means to me is that you have chosen in this lifetime to work on lessons that you have very little experience with. And so that is a challenge for you. Now you're lucky in that you kind of balance that out with that 8 expression, which means that you have some extra gifts, some extra talents, some extra abilities than the average person that will help you out along the way. But one of the issues that I do see there is with this 2 karmic lesson number, which means you really don't have a lot of past life experience with relationships. That is probably going to be really tough for you, given that the one thing that you desire above all else is to have, close, intimate connections and a romantic partner. Like I said, with that 2 soul urge. So there's this really intense desire for something that you have very little experience with, and so maybe don't have a lot of, kind of intuitive sense of how to be in a relationship because you haven't experienced it in past lives. So I think that could be a bit of a challenge for you. And again, especially with that 8 expression too, where relationships are sometimes hard. I think relationships probably have been a challenge for you in your life, especially romantic relationships. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes there can be, issues of codependency when the 2 is a challenge for you in your chart, and or like sometimes having just as much as you might desire a relationship, having a hard time kind of opening up and exposing yourself and being vulnerable to other people, which very well may be the case when you have also combined with that this 1 intensity point where that makes you a little bit more reserved and introverted. So it's just interesting, the key thing that I would take from that is just that you have chosen in this lifetime to work on some things that you really don't have much experience with in the past. And that's great in terms of your soul's evolution. But it just means that sometimes you've picked kind of a tough path for yourself, maybe. But again, because you have this 8 expression number, it makes it a little bit easier for you. But that's kind of what I would take for that and from that, and something that I just wanted to point out. It's not a huge element in your chart. It's not something that I always address in a reading because it sometimes really isn't relevant. But in your case, I think it's an important thing to note just because those karmic lesson numbers are the very same numbers that are parts of your core elements in your birth chart.